JR, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. Really appreciate you coming on, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, for those people out there who may not know who you are or know everything that you've done, maybe take a minute or two and just kind of go through your background and how you got to where you got to today.
Yeah, so I'm from San Diego. Actually grew up in Louisiana, moved to San Diego when I was 12. Played high school football at Mira Mesa, college football at San Diego State. Was drafted by the Miami Dolphins in 2003. So played the National Football League for 4 years, 2 years for the Dolphins, 2 years for the Cowboys. Played 6 years total, a year in Canada, a year for Arena. And then I became a head football coach and athletic director at a small private school in Newport Beach. Did that for 6 years, but I graduated with a business degree. So I always knew when I got done playing football that I wanted to be a businessman, be in entrepreneurship. So right around the same time I got the job as the head football coach at the private school, I also started my first company and left the private school in 2015 and have been in full-blown entrepreneurship since.
So I know you went to Mira Mesa High School, had a really great career there, but you were a quarterback, right?
Yep.
You were. So how was that? How'd you make that transition from quarterback to wide receiver?
So in Pop Warner, I played running back. And then when I moved to California, Marcus Brady, who's now a coach for the Indianapolis Colts, had just left the Pop Warner team that I joined to go play high school ball. And the coaches were like, "Oh, you remind us a lot of Marcus Brady. Can you throw the ball?" And I never played quarterback before that, but my dad was a quarterback. So, I was very intrigued by it and kind of jumped in and started playing quarterback. And, there's a lot of different aspects to quarterback that aren't, that don't follow other positions, right? The leadership role, the having to be accountable for everybody else, not just yourself, having to play well and in order to earn the respect of your teammates, having to be tough. There was just a lot of things incorporated into playing that position that I gravitated towards. So I ended up playing wide receiver in college. But yeah, the quarterback position in high school is definitely something that shaped the way that I approached work ethic and leadership. Had a lot to do with me playing that position.
So where does that come from, right? You're 16, 17 years old. You're in high school. You're the quarterback. You're the de facto leader. I think you nailed it. You're exactly right. Those are the type of traits you need to exhibit. Where does that come from? Was that innate with you? Is that from your family? Is that from your coaches?
So I think it's assumed that the quarterback will be the leader of the team. I think the person in that position determines whether that assumption is correct or not. And for me, I've never had an issue with the leadership role. And so when I was put into that position, I not only did I want to be a good quarterback on the field, but I want to be considered a good quarterback. I mean, all the great quarterbacks are considered great leaders. If you look at Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, if you look at some of the guys who aren't considered a great quarterback, a lot of that is tied back to their ability to lead or not lead the football team. So for me, I just wanted to be a great quarterback. And I knew that meant not only performing well on the field, but being a leader of the team and all the things that came with that is something that, it was a dual, there was a dual need there.
Yeah, no. So, sure, recruited by a lot of different programs, decided to stay close to home, San Diego State. What was about that decision?
So when I was getting recruited, I actually didn't get recruited by a ton of schools. I got recruited by the military academies to continue to play quarterback. I played quarterback at a time where if you were an athletic quarterback, one or two things happened. You ran the option in college. That was at the time when Nebraska was running the option like crazy in all of the military academies, or you switch positions. Today's day and age with guys like Lamar Jackson, I mean, they run the RPO. They're just a little bit more creative with how to use a athletic quarterback. In my day, it was you either go run the option or you switch positions. And because I always felt I was a football player first and foremost, when the opportunity came to make a choice, I decided to stay home at San Diego State, switch to wide receiver, and one of the best decisions I ever could have made.
So I know a lot of the military academies, Navy, Army, they do run the option. Were you being recruited to go up there and play quarterback?
Yep, exactly. So I got offered by Army and Air Force. Navy kind of came in the final hour. But, my goal since I was 6 years old was to play in the National Football League. So when I took the opportunity at San Diego State to be a wide receiver, one of the things that I had at the forefront of my brain, which is kind of crazy if you look back on it now, was the ability to make it to the National Football League. It's harder to do that through the service academies just because of the way the programs are structured. So I decided to, stay home and play at San Diego State to give myself the best opportunity to pursue that vision of playing in the National Football League.
Right on. And, code for, I was recruited by the military academies as code for you were a really good student and must have had pretty good test scores, because those guys do not bring in dummies. They're recruiting the best of the best. So, well, look, I obviously your career at San Diego State was phenomenal. I definitely want to dive into that a little bit and some of the ridiculous numbers you put up there. But I want to hear a little bit about that transition, right? That I think that transition from high school, living at home, mom and dad, all of a sudden, you're away and you're put into a different world, and, kind of be overwhelming at times. Not everybody's able to make it. I don't know how many people came in on your class, but I think in my class, I came in with like 28 guys. I think 6 of us graduated. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what that transition was like and, how you found a way to be successful there.
I tell people I had the best of both worlds. Going to San Diego State, I moved out the house. So, I had the freedom of being away at college. But I was also close enough to home where if I need to get my laundry done or need to get a home cooked meal or hug from mom, I was a 17-minute drive away from the house. So my transition was phenomenal. For me, I had, again, the space to grow and transition from a high school kid to an adult through college. But again, I also had that support and that proximity to my family that if I needed anything, they were right up the street. And I credit a lot of that to where I am today in terms of, like you said, a lot of guys go into college and they don't make it out. And some of that is due to being homesick, right? Like if you live in San Diego and you sign with Syracuse and the climate is different, the food is different, the people are different, and you don't have something to remind you of why you made the decision, but also to comfort you, it's very easy to get homesick. And I think a lot of guys do get homesick. And for me, I wasn't homesick, but I was position sick. When I first made the transition from quarterback to wide receiver, my body hurt in places that it never hurt before.
No more red jersey.
No more red jersey. I was terrible at the position when I first started because I didn't have any experience running, catching, reading coverages, all that good stuff. So my first 2 years was a little bit of a grind, and it was tough. And I think that if I did not have the support of my family, being able to drive home, complain to my dad, do all the things that we need to do to process new situations, maybe I would have fallen into that other piece of the puzzle. But yeah, the staying home and also being away was, I think the best thing for me. And it's one of the things that when I'm telling kids to consider where they're going to go to school, like take all that stuff into consideration, because you don't want to be one of the guys who doesn't make it all the way through. Yeah.
So I remember watching you play, and I knew you put up some big numbers, but I had to look it up before the conversation. Senior year, 128 catches for 1,785 yards and 13 touchdowns. Those are insane numbers. That's a good college career for most players. So you just made a comment. Hey, when I transitioned to the position, I was terrible. Handful of years later, did you lead? I don't know if you led NCAA in receiving. You did. Talk to me about that journey, man. That's special.
Yeah, I think, and this kind of ties back to what does it mean to be a leader, right? Like, I think leaders innately are going to work through difficulties and problems to get to the ultimate goal, which is to be as good as I can possibly be, right? And so for me, that was kind of a part of my journey, but it always was a part of my journey. I was never the best when I started at something, but I kind of found out just personally, the more and more I stick to something, the better and better I get. Some guys are just naturally gifted, right? And we've all seen those guys who can either shoot really well or run really fast or whatever it is, right? And I was never that guy. I was never that guy that was just naturally like good at something, great at something. I was always pretty good, but never naturally great. And so for me, it was really about that idea of saying, making the decision, saying, I want to be one of the best that ever has come through this program. And making that decision at a time when things weren't going well, right? It's easy to come in and say, hey, I just, came in and killed it in camp and I'm now a freshman and I'm starting. I want to be one of the greatest that ever leaves the program, right? That's a pretty straight line decision to make. But to go through, to be redshirted, to battle drops, to battle the ability to, as Coach Dickens would say, stay on my feet, right? All those things. And then to be able to say, you know what, despite that, when it's all said and done, I want to be one of the best that's ever come through this program. That was my motivation. So it was kind of like creating the destination, starting with the back of the book, right? So creating the destination in the beginning, to me, is kind of what created the journey. And I'm lucky. What happened to me was, Coach Tolver was relieved of his duties my junior year. Coach Kraft came in. Coach Kraft, his moniker was Aircraft. He loved to throw the football around. And so, I got lucky. I got lucky because Coach Kraft came in and he wanted to throw the ball 40 times a game. But I've always been told luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I prepared, I was ready, and when it showed up, I took advantage of it.
Yeah, you sure did, man. And congratulations. I know you got inducted into the San Diego State Hall of Fame. How was that call? How was getting that call?
It was a surprise. It's funny because, when you're going through your journey and your focus is on trying to be a little bit better every day, right? Trying to get better, trying to do the things to help your team win. You kind of gloss over some of the things that you do that are great in the process. And so I remember when Steve Schnall called me, it surprised me. I never saw myself as somebody who was Marshall Faulk worthy, right? Marshall Faulk's in the Aztec Hall of Fame, or Tony Gwynn worthy. I never saw myself that way. So when I got the phone call, I was humbled, excited, shocked. But, after going back and looking at some of the things and really having conversations about, what my career was and being able to compare that to others who had come through the program, I felt deserving, after a while. And so I was surprised in the beginning, but I'm humbled that they, brought me into the Hall of Fame. But at the same time, I felt like, I deserved it based off of the body of work that I had while I played at the school.
Yeah, and that body of work did give you a chance to go play professional, right? To live that dream that you'd set when you were a little kid. Drafted by the Miami Dolphins, 2003. Talk to me about that transition, man. That's a big jump. It's another big jump.
I was in my garage, changes, right? Greg. I was in my garage listening to Alicia Keys. Why don't you call me? I was drafted in the 5th round, and everybody thinks they should be drafted in the 1st, right? So that was a little bit of a long road to finally get the call, but I picked up the phone when they called me. It was Norv Turner on the other line, and he said, "JR, you ready? We're going to make you a Dolphin." And all of the anxiety that I had went through over the first 2 days, it disappeared immediately. It was at that moment I kind of realized, like, man, been dreaming of this moment since I was a 6-year-old kid, and it happened. And I can remember exactly where I was when I got the phone call. I can remember the expression on my mom's face when I told her that the Dolphins were going to draft me, and we all looked at the TV and we saw my name go across the bottom of the screen. I remember that stuff very, very vividly. So it was an exciting time for sure.
And you ended up playing, how many years did you end up playing now, professional?
4. Well, four in the NFL and then 2 outside of the NFL. So 6 total.
6 total years, man. So, it's interesting, right? I think sports ends for everybody at one point or another. Unless you're Tom Brady, maybe you just play forever. But other than that, for the normal people, it's going to end. Some people it ends in high school. Some people it ends in college. Some people are lucky enough that it ends in the pros. But, in a situation like yourself, right? You're probably not even 30 years old yet. And you've lived a lifelong dream, but it's over and it happens abruptly. So talk to me a little bit about how you handled that, first of all. Were you prepared and planned? And then, how did you start to, think about the next part of your life? You're on mute.
Sorry. It's kind of like being dropped off of a cliff a little bit, right? So in high school, that there's an opportunity for it to end because you're a senior. So at the very least, you're going to get an opportunity to play until you're a senior. And then from there, you're not exactly sure what's going to happen. Same thing in college, right? You got 5 years of eligibility. So there's a start and there's a stop. In the NFL, it's like it's going to end, but you can't plan for when. And that part stinks. Because everybody wants to play 10 years in the National Football League, but 80% of guys don't make it past their 3rd year. So how do you plan for something that literally you can feel and taste and see and touch? You have it, it's yours, but it can be ripped away from you at any time. And, most people don't leave the game leaves them. And again, the problem with the National Football League is that, or professional sports in general, is that you can still want to keep playing, still have the ability to keep playing, and the league or the team or the sport decides that you're no longer good enough. Most people don't get to make the decision themselves. So it's tough. And I think most guys go through the same thing, which is like this phase of abandonment, of unknown, a little bit of an identity crisis. Who am I outside of the game? I know I have something internally inside of me that got me to this position, but I've never had to tap into it. I literally just had to show up and do my job and play and be a good teammate and all that good stuff. I never had to really create systems for myself or, tap into some of the transferable skills that, again, I know are there. I just never really had to develop them or address them. So it's difficult. And I want to say the first really 2 or 3 years out of the game is no matter what you're doing, you always feel like a football player within those first 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, you could be in sales. You could be a personal trainer. You could be working at McDonald's. It doesn't matter. You always feel like and identify as a football player for those first few years of transition. So it is difficult. I think there's a lot of resources now that weren't there when I was coming out that are now helping guys through the transition. But I think it's inevitable. Most guys are going to go through some form of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody else about this, and they described it as, going through a midlife crisis at 26 years old. They were drafted, played a couple of years. As you said, sometimes you walk away from the game, but a lot of times the game walks away from you. And, it's like, what now? What do I do? This is all I know. This is all I've done my entire life. So, it's like you talk about the NFL and you talk about resources being put in place, but at the end of the day, people got to sort of do it themselves, right? I mean, it's the same thing as, getting to college or getting to the NFL, right? Like no one's going to help you. The game's going to go on. The team moves on. No one's bigger than the team or bigger than the game. And now you get into this working world, and especially yourself. I know you're entrepreneurial. You've obviously had a great entrepreneurial career. What do you think allowed you, or what gave you that, sort of that motivation, that kick to be able to just like be like, nah, man, I'm gonna put in the work that I've put in before, and I'm gonna be successful in this next chapter?
It's just what you just said. It's the desire to be great at something. To me, that desire doesn't change, right? If you're the type of person where you're like, I want to be the best at, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be golfing or doing CrossFit, right? I know you do a lot of CrossFit, whatever it is, right? Your goal is to push yourself to the ability, to the level of greatness. And so for me, that'll never leave me. Whatever I'm doing and I'm passionate about and I'm committed to, I'm going to want to be the best at it. I just had to find that next thing to kind of like transfer my interest to. And so I actually went to a seminar. One of the guys gave me a pretty good perspective. He said, you can't chase the adrenaline of football after football is over. It doesn't exist. So realize that, understand it, understand that there's nothing going to ever quite compare to the adrenaline of being on a football team and chasing a championship. So get that out of your head. Don't try to recreate it. It's not going to happen. It's a part of your story, but you're not going to get that feeling anymore. Now, take that desire to be great and attach it to something with the reasonable expectations that come with the greatness and whatever you take, and go from there. So if it's business and greatness means you generate a lot of revenue, or you hire a lot of people, or you impact a lot of clients, right? Those are all good things to chase in terms of that defining greatness per se. Just don't expect that, when you achieve those things or while you're chasing those things, you're going to get the same feeling from the game that you're going to get the same feeling from that you got from the game. So that was really good advice for me. It allowed me to like temper my expectations without, holding myself accountable to being the best at, whatever it is I'm currently doing.
And I know you're very active in the San Diego startup community. Startup San Diego, you're a board member. I believe you're one of the founding board members of a group that's goal is to help minority business owners and entrepreneurs get started. When you do talk to these people, what are some of the things that you're really trying to help them understand? Maybe lessons that you learned in athletics, things that you've learned outside of athletics, but those really key messages that you think are important for them to be able to embrace to be successful in their entrepreneurial journeys.
So I think the first thing really is system. We hear system all the time and trust the process and all that good stuff. But to me, putting yourself inside of a system allows you to reach your full potential, right? And so when I look at a business, I'm saying, understand that your passions are going to be one thing. Your desire to generate revenue, to make money, to impact clients, that's going to be one thing, right? Separate that from the how. The why is something that I think is, if you're entrepreneurial, it's pretty easy to decide that you're going to put action behind your why. Pretty easy to do it, right? So system to me is like, somebody told me that system stands for save yourself time, energy, and money. So if you're really passionate about bringing things to life, right? You have this passion, you have this desire, you have this goal, you have the internal drive to put yourself out there and create something from nothing. That's just a starting point. The how really is where the rubber meets the road. There's 10,000 great ideas out there. There really is. And the thing that separates a great idea from a crappy idea is literally execution. And so for me, like when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm always kind of talking about the how, right? How are you going to get to 7 figures of revenue? How are you going to impact 1,000 clients over the next 12 months or whatever you feel like your metrics are? Because once you get out of the why and start really focusing on the system of the how, then you'll find out really quickly if your perception and your realities are gonna match up. So that's something that I talk about. Just peel the layer back. Let's take the emotions out of it, and let's see if this dream that you have, this vision that you have, is really actionable and executable. Let's talk about the details of that. And then if you get to those details and you're like, yeah, I could do that. I can make 125 calls a day. Yeah, I can do that to chase my why. Then boom, now you have the ability to really see if you can get to your end game.
Yeah, there's two things I want to unpack there, but I want to start with, I love your comment on like there's thousands of good ideas out there. I probably similar to you, I'll occasionally get asked to help, or someone will have a business idea and they'll give me a call and they want, my 2 cents or my advice, or, what would I do here? And help, always willing to help, especially, friends. And then, they'll say something like, hey, I'm going to send over an NDA. And you're always like, look, do you think your idea that you're going to talk to me about is so good that I'm going to steal your idea and go do this? Like it's all about execution, man. It's all about perseverance. It's all about, willing to put in the time and the effort and all those types of things to make something successful. So, your ideas, as you said, it's kind of a dime a dozen. It's what you're willing to put in behind that idea. But the second part, and I really love what you just said here, and I believe in it so fully, is the find your why. Right. I mean, I think purpose, the why, is so essential. It's so important in everything in life. Like, can you give me a little bit more on how you view that in your own personal life?
And it's funny, man, because when you get into business, when I got into business, I thought my why was to make a lot of money. Like, I'm just being perfectly honest, right? Like, I'm starting my own business, and it's because I want to generate enough revenue, take home enough money to be financially free, right? In football, that was also an opportunity of the game. But I was passionate about the game. I mean, I played the game since I was 9 years old. And I played for free until I was 23. So I wasn't playing the game for money. I was playing the game for love. Now, I happened to get paid good money at some point while playing the game, but that was really just a byproduct of me chasing my why, which was being as good as I possibly could as a football player. And so I think business, sometimes we get confused, right? We get confused and say, if I can get into this business, I can make a lot of money. So my why is to make a lot of money. And money is never the reason. I found that out the hard way. The first business that I started was a cost reduction consulting company for waste and recycling expenses. And I started the business because I said, I can make a lot of money. I didn't start it because I was passionate about recycling, or I was passionate about sustainability, or I was passionate about, hiring people and culture and all that. I started the business because I was like, I can make a bunch of money, right? And eventually it fizzled out. Now, the business did well. I sold the business in 2012, but it was never about the money. It was more so about, man, I'm really doing something. I'm spending a lot of time, energy, and effort in something that I'm not really passionate about, And so that's the piece that I think is most important. I took a transformational leadership class about 3 years ago, and they made me dial my purpose down into 2 words. And I had to go through this 2-year process to figure out what my 2-word purpose was. And it was to facilitate collaboration. At the end of the day, whether I'm making a lot of money or I'm getting my butt kicked, as long as I'm in a team environment and I'm connecting the dots and I'm helping people meet people and be better as a result, I am 100% operating within my purpose. So to your point, I think that, establishing your why first is going to get you to whatever the results are, whether it's making a lot of money or being insta-fame, whatever that is, right? Whatever that looks like, establishing the why up front, doing the hard work to establish your why and your purpose up front is going to keep you going forward when some of those byproducts haven't quite showed up yet.
Love that, man. So look, there are very few entrepreneurs out there that haven't suffered some type of setback or some type of failure. It just comes with the territory. When you think back over your career and maybe even, prior to your career, what's like that one or one of the failures that you've had that, kind of sticks with you a little bit, and, how have you learned and evolved and made yourself better from that?
Yeah. Chasing money is probably the precipice of it, right? So I started another company, international recycling company in Panama City, Panama. To the day, that was my biggest failure. I mean, I lost a lot of money. I raised a bunch of money, so I lost other people's money. I definitely did not prioritize my family and my relationship in the pursuit of that venture. So there was a lot of tough lessons that I took out of it, even so much to the point that when I had to liquidate that company and close it, one of the pictures that still haunts me is when they came to my warehouse and they put the chain on the door, right? Like, that's a picture that I see a lot when it comes to like reflecting back on things. But yeah, one of the things that haunts me the most about that is it was completely avoidable is probably not the right word, because there's a lot of lessons that I learned from that I don't think I'd be who I am today, sitting where I am today, without those. But in that same breath, why make mistakes if you don't have to? And so one of the things that I've really adopted is not building things in a vacuum anymore. There's nothing new under the sun. Everybody has already done everything that we are attempting to do. You just got to find that person or that group, and you got to have conversations with them. And you have to be open to the feedback that you receive. Whether you take the feedback or not, that's on you. But being closed off to the conversations that can lead to feedback that can put you on a better path is 1000% on me. And so that's one of the things that I didn't do as I was pursuing that venture was I didn't have as many conversations as I should have. I wasn't as diligent as I could have been. And again, I was pursuing something for money, not for purpose. And eventually all of those things made it too tough for me to overcome that venture.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people out there, they're trying to start something. They're thinking about raising money. They're raising outside capital. I mean, there's a positive to it is it's a little bit like burning Cortez's ship, right? Like, there's no turning back. The second you take somebody else's money and you have a fiduciary responsibility over them and they believe in you, that pressure that you got to wear, is significant. But, the flip side of that is, it's a lot of pressure, man. When you're working with someone else's money and they took a chance on you and they believed in you and whatever that venture is, you got to wear that. You got to own that every day. And it can take a little bit of the fun out of entrepreneurship at times. But so I feel you on that. I've been in situations similar to that. If you could go back and give, an 18-year-old, JR some advice, what would you tell him?
I would say the skills that we often overlook are sometimes the most important. I look at little stuff like being able to operate Excel. Again, these are like little things that maybe in the moment when you're thinking big picture, these little things, they don't matter. So the 18-year-old JR, I would say, try to learn as much about the little things as you possibly can. Because at the end of the day, like, business is all built on the same foundation, right? We're talking accounting, legal, we're talking bookkeeping, we're talking taxes, insurance. Like, every business is basically built on the same foundation, you need to understand what that means, what that looks like, right? Do a better job of saying, okay, I am going to chase revenue, pursue revenue, but at the end of the day, my foundation is my foundation. Like, I don't care if my house is on the beach or it's in the hills. Like, all houses have the same thing underneath. They have the same piping and plumbing and electrical and, whatever foundation, right? So for me, understanding what it means to be a business is probably where I would have spent more time at a younger age, as opposed to just on the idea itself. And that's probably the advice that I would give myself. Learn as much about the business of business first, and then attach that learning to the business of industry, whatever you're trying to pursue as a result.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, in my personal journey, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and, we talk back about, the college journey in athletics, and almost everybody says the same thing, man. Like, oh, I wish I'd spent, more time in school. I wish I paid more attention. I wish I challenged myself harder. And, the truth is, and, I don't want to say universally, but I think it's the majority. The student athlete is kind of a misnomer. Like, if you're playing at a major program anywhere, any sport, you're an athlete student. It is the number one thing, unfortunately, that these people and many athletes are focused with. And, school kind of becomes a little bit of a second thought. You want to go back and you want to help these young students and these athletes realize that their athletic career is going to end and they're going to have to eventually have something to fall back on. And it's like just every other stubborn 18-year-old kid out there, right? Like, you can't tell them anything. Like, you don't know. And then it's like, you got to be in your 30s. And one day you look back and you're like, man, I wish I had done those things. Like, how do you get that across to these young kids, man? How do you get them to understand that, those are the things that are going to make them successful in life?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, like, if you look back at where we were at that age, I think it's kind of inevitable. It's inevitable that, you tell the kid, don't touch the stove, they're going to burn themselves, and they still want to touch the stove. And some of them are actually going to touch the stove. One of the things I can say is that if we can put the information out there and make it easily accessible and easy to digest, I think that's where it starts, right? So you can lead that horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. I think that that's something that, as people on the other side of this thing who have been through what we've been through, and then we're looking back and saying, if I would have known then what I know now, we have to give kids, women, men, the ability to go through that process on their own. But at the same time, what role can we play to say, hey, look, if you don't want to go through that process, like, read this or listen to this or look at that or let's talk about this. And it's funny because I've had this conversation a lot based off of this name, image, and likeness opportunity that kids have in college now, right? So the NCAA basically created 600,000 business owners overnight by allowing kids to generate revenue from their name, image, and likeness. Some kids are going to want to listen to what does it mean to be in business. Some are not. But that doesn't take the responsibility away from us or the university or parents to make sure that we make the information to be successful as easily accessible and digestible as possible. So that's those that do want to listen to and understand it without going through the mistakes have the ability to do that.
You're a family man. I know you have young children. How do you balance life and work?
Oh, man. So my wife and I, we talk about this a lot. When I was in Dallas playing for the Cowboys, Bill Parcells was my coach. And Bill Parcells used to talk a lot about boxing. And he used to talk about how boxing was his favorite sport to follow. Not because of the fight, but because of the discipline and consistency it took the fighters to be able to fight. Like, if you're a fighter and you come in overweight, you can't fight. You know that, they know that, so there's no end game, right? And so for me, like, I've always taken that and said, I don't think balance is really achievable as an entrepreneur. But what I do think achievable is being disciplined in the consistencies that I deliver to my kids. And so one of the things that I'm very consistent with my kids is bedtime. Like, I'm the one who makes sure that I'm home and that I'm praying with my kids and reading with my kids and I'm putting them to sleep, right? Like, that's one of the things that I know that I can control for the most part. You know, there's times here or there where I'm traveling or I have an event or whatever it is, but I'm very intentional about protecting that space with my kids. So for me, it's more so like, I'm not trying to be, let's call it balanced per se. I'm just trying to deliver some consistent experiences to my kids so that as they grow up, they're never like, oh, you know, dad was never there, or dad didn't do this, or dad didn't do that. Right. So that's kind of how I approach it.
You could be remembered for one thing. What would it be?
Oh, man. I would like to be remembered for looking out for others. You know, I want to be the guy where my friends know if they have an issue, they have a problem, they have an idea, they need help getting from point A to point B. I'm somebody that they could use as a resource. You know, I think my gift is my ability to connect good people with good people, like take individual conversations that I have and connect those conversations back to other conversations. You know, I know you're really good at this. You've introduced me to a couple of people since I've started my business, and that's something that I find a ton of value in, not only being on the receiving end, but also being on the giving end. So, yeah, I think I want to be remembered as the guy that if you ever had an issue or you needed help getting from point A to point B, you could give JR a call, and he might not have the answer, but he's probably going to put you in touch with somebody who can help you find the answer.
Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you sitting down and chatting. You've always been one of my favorite people. Back in the day, just, you know, as a fan watching you play and do what you did on the field, but then as you know, we've stayed in contact and, you know, kind of gone through our own journeys together and have always stayed in touch and, you know, obviously helping each other out as we can. I think your purpose and your why of, you know, bringing communities together and helping people connect, I mean, it like couldn't be more spot on than, you know, just about every interaction I've had. And really appreciate hearing your advice, man. I think you just have so much wisdom and so articulate in your ability to, you know, to talk about it. So thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. You know, what's great too, is I think about our relationship and, you know, you remind me, man, that who you are today isn't necessarily who you are going to be or who you're destined to be tomorrow. I mean, Greg was a 320-pound killing machine when I met him, and then he turned into an underwear model, you know, 2 or 3 years after leaving San Diego State. So that's actually one of those things that I think, again, from a transferable skills internal standpoint, you know, we're all a little bit different. Athletes are all a little bit different, but at the end of the day, there's something inside of us that continues to evolve us. And again, some people will evolve physically, right? Like you did, where you have the intestinal fortitude to go from 315 pounds down to 215 because you decided that's what you wanted to do, you know? And so, yeah, as much as you've gotten from my journey, just know that I've gotten just as much from yours.
Thanks, brother. Take care, man.
All right, brother.